This woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group.
What you just witnessed here is a typical human conforming to a group. Throughout history, this has been a very common occurrence. For example, in the 1950s, McCarthyism was pervasive in the United States to the extent where it forced families to become very divisive amongst themselves. A large portion of the American population felt that communism would infiltrate their government and their core values. You're probably wondering why all these Americans would go along with such a fallacy of such great magnitude, although it may not have been true. This behavior could be understood by taking a look at Solomon Asch's experiment on conformity. In 1951, Solomon Asch conducted his experiment on conformity. 16 years prior to this, a psychologist by the name of Muzafer Sherif conducted a similar experiment on conformity. However, Asch felt that this experiment had too many variables and that it had no real answer, so he tried and fixed it for himself. There were 6 participants in the room, one being the subject. Although the answer was obvious, Asch wanted to see if the subject would still conform with the group and choose the wrong answer, although they knew the answer was something else.
2.
In this variation of the experiment, 37% of the subjects conformed. After the experiment, Asch interviewed the subjects, asking why they conformed. Most of them replied that they didn't want to oppose the group, but others genuinely felt that they were wrong and their eyes were deceiving them. Asch later did a similar experiment. However, in this variation, he gave the subject a partner to answer these questions. The partner was instructed to give the right answer along with the subject.
1. 2.
1.
2.
This helped reduce the normative factor drastically, and conforming dropped down to 5% among the subjects. These findings changed the way that people perceive social influence forever. Although Asch broke the code of ethics, he didn't face any repercussions because it wasn't so strict back then. This experiment was slightly unethical because after the experiment concluded, subjects felt that their self-esteem has been damaged. In the final variation, Asch gave the subject a pen and paper, which completely removed the normative factor. Conforming dropped down to 3%.
1.
He helped influence Wesley Perkins and his social norm approach. He influenced Marie Jodha and her 8 types of behavior relating to conformity. Without his influence, she would not have known where to begin. Asch's experiment was a turning point in conformity studies in psychology. He discovered that people will go against their own beliefs just to fit in. Many psychologists use his experiment as a base for their own experiments. With Asch's experiment, we now understand why people do that. Although it makes no sense looking at it from the outside, when you're in that situation, your body just can't help it but conform. For example, at a Trump rally, he may say the most outrageous thing, but everybody will clap, even if they don't believe it, because they don't want to stand out in the crowd. Although this experiment was done many years ago, it's still a common occurrence in today's society. Without his experiment, they wouldn't be so familiar with the whole social influence idea, and they'd be very behind, or their experiments wouldn't be as accurate as they are now. Consider how marketing companies, the government, and other organizations exploit us with this conforming behavior patterns and use it for their desired outcome. Now think, have you conformed today?